So here we are, Agitation Rising, reporting in. I am Zach Gitrich. We have Alan Axelrod and Luke Barber here. And we were going to talk real quick about a news article that we just saw on hoiabc.com. Mental health professionals could join Peoria police at crime scenes. Peoria police could soon be armed with a new tool to fight crime across the city: mental health awareness. Illinois House Bill 5319 proposes the creation of the Police Plus Mental Health Emergency Response Pilot. It's a collaboration between State Representative Jihan Gordon Booth, Peoria Police Chief Eric Echevarria, and Unity Point Health. So we kind of see a coalition between the medical industrial complex and then like the police apparatus. Together, they've developed a CoResponder model for calls that involve a mental health crisis. A special team of officers would hold follow-up visits for survivors of violent crimes, plus give them resources like help with safe housing and counseling. And I'm going to go ahead and click this.
Become the newest weapon in the police department's arsenal. Mental health professionals could soon join officers at the crime scene as soon as this year.
It's an effort born out of a program used by another Illinois city, and it has been proven effective. John Schoenheider breaks down how it's going to work in Peoria.
Fix the flower, you don't remove the flower, you fix the environment around it.
House Bill 5319 aims to give Peoria police the resources to deal with mental health situations. It's a collaboration between State Representative Jahan Gordon Booth, Police Chief Eric Echevarria, and Unity Point Health. Together, they've developed a co-responder model for calls that involve a mental health crisis.
We want to find the resources, we want to find the ways to get our community to help their needs when we talk about mental and behavioral health and understand it.
During his time in Elgin, Chief Echevarria was involved in the development of a program just like this one. It was a project that sent officers to places as far as New York and the UK for research.
The ultimate goal is to provide the services to the community where you're addressing some of the long-term issues with long-term solutions and making sure that, everybody has a voice in that.
Because of the success of the Elgin project, the chief reached out to Unity Point to create a similar task force. It's a fully local effort that could reach farther than just the River City.
I would envision this being a very successful model here and one that other communities would want to emulate specific to their needs.
Sparks Thompson adds it's a good way to help police respond to situations where mental health training is required. That sentiment shared in local community groups.
It'll give them an eye-opener, and perhaps they will approach someone who may have done harm or may have done something wrong in a different manner and an empathetic manner.
It's unknown how much the program will cost. The bill was recently introduced in the House of Representatives. If approved, it could take effect later this year. Reporting in Peoria, John Schoenheider, Heart of Illinois, ABC.
Yeah, that's obviously very interesting to us because we were all part of getting C.E.S.S.A passed last year, the Community Emergency Services and Support Act, also known as the Stefan Watts Act, which explicitly states the opposite of what Jihan Gordon Booth's bill would do, which was create a co-responder model. In fact, I have the language of C.E.S.S.A, and it just says, Section 35. It says prohibition of use of law enforcement for emergency response or transportation in any jurisdiction that provides a system for emergency response for individuals with physical health needs that is distinct from the jurisdiction's law enforcement personnel. Law enforcement shall not be used to provide emergency response for an individual when an individual only requires, on-site emergency mental, behavioral health, transportation, things like that.
And it's also interesting, too, because as a person with a developmental disability myself, specifically autism, when police are responding to a mental health crisis, it actually causes more trauma for the individual with a disability. And actually can cause a snowball effect, which only makes the mental health emergency crisis situation that much worse.
And just to be clear, the State Rep Gordon Booth's bill, which is called HB 5319, only applies to the Peoria Police Department of the entire state. It only applies to the Peoria Police Department. I mean, and really, what it seems to me is that C.E.S.S.A has a no home rule act clause where just because you're a city that has home rule, you can't get around the requirements of C.E.S.S.A, which is that law enforcement not respond to non-criminal, non-violent mental and behavioral health calls. Now, this went into effect. This specific policy of police not responding to those calls went into effect January 1st of this year. However, the bill also recognizes that unless you have the alt responders built up, which is what we're in the process of trying to do right now, and we're hoping to have that completely ready by January 1st, 2023, then they can respond because they're the only ones that are able to respond. But I mean, if this were to pass the state, if this were to pass or be signed by the governor, I mean, this would get around the home rule prohibitions that C.E.S.S.A had that prevented them from using CoResponder models. I do think it's interesting that they talk about the cost. It's like, well, if you have a police officer there, it's going to cost more. Period. Like if your model is a CoResponder model, it's going to cost more than if you just had a couple social workers that were there. I mean, police officers are expensive in general.
Interesting too, because it's also in conflict with some of the federal laws on the books too.
Okay, can you explain that a little bit more?
504 has a clause called manifestation determination that is used quite a bit, as well as the fact that as a local government is bound by Title II. 504 manifestation determination states that when a behavior is the result of a disability, such behavior shall be treated as a mental health crisis situation and treatment shall be provided for said crisis, rather than taken in a disciplinary manner. And so what we're seeing is a police response which takes things in a disciplinary manner when it should be taking things in a health manner. And 504 Rehab Act specifically states that to be the case. And given that both Peoria and Urbana and these other municipalities are municipal governments, they are also bound by Title II of the ADA. So one thing that we also see with police is that they don't provide accommodations when necessary when they approach individuals with disabilities. And police are still governed by Title II as they are employees of the state and local governments.
And towards the points that Luke was making, this is why we've had multiple meetings now about filing a complaint with the Department of Justice, naming the city of Urbana, again, the other city in the state that has implemented such a program. And that is something that needs to be an expedited priority. My bandwidth, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think what's really important for us to stress is that, you know, we're talking about who is the first person on the scene of a call for service, right? If we send police, it is ostensibly because there is a public safety threat. And what C.E.S.S.A does is it basically says people that are having mental or behavioral health issues are not threats to public safety, right? This is a healthcare issue. This isn't a public safety issue. So, you know,
and the difference between those would be like if the individual was armed, they had a weapon in their hands.
Exactly.
Or was engaging in stuff that would put the public at risk.
Yeah, exactly.
That is breaking the law or breaking the criminal statutes that are currently in place.
Yeah. And when you have a CoResponder model, ultimately the police are the ones who make the final call, right? They're the authority on the scene that's going to decide exactly what's going to happen, and it's going to be up to their discretion.
Having a hearing on it later on the 17th of this month.
On the 17th. Okay.
And so that means
And
that
it's in the police. It's in the police committee in the
and
state.
that and that
they
sorry, go ahead.
they currently have 6 people signed up to provide testimony. What surprised me from several of the people that are signed up for testimony is that several of them are nonprofit disability agencies. And so what's interesting is we sort of see it where the social welfare system, the social work systems, are sort of trying to push this CoResponder model system when we know that disability self-advocates and people with disabilities have said no, they don't want this CoResponder model because the police are always the ones that are screwing up. There was a video in another state where an individual with a disability had a toy fire truck in his hand, and they shot the caseworker. And because they kept trying to claim that the individual had a weapon, and he's like, no, it's a toy truck. It's a toy truck. And we've seen other scenarios where they think a person is trying to flee or whatever, but they're just deaf. They don't hear them saying, stop, you're under arrest or whatever, because accommodations weren't provided. And we've seen this time and time again where the stuff that the police needed to do to interact appropriately with individuals with disabilities doesn't happen. And the end result is either a death or serious injury.
Yeah, what the head of the TriCounty Urban Lead said in the interview was particularly interesting. It's like, oh, maybe this will, change their perspective on how to deal with these sorts of things. I mean, it's a very reformist position. It's like, it's like implicit bias training, like has like the actual methods that they use, which is essentially just a multiculturalism class. Really, the studies show that they have no like lasting effects. You're not going to be able to teach a hammer to not like hitting nails, right? Like the police are the agents of the state that have the legitimate use of violence, and that's great when they're going after like murderers and terrorists, but when they're dealing with somebody that's having a crisis, like that we see all over the place, then you don't want you don't want to respond to that with violence. And that's the main thing the police do, is that they respond to situations with violence or the threat of violence in order to get control of some situation. And by passing C.E.S.S.A, right, which passed unanimously, like both houses, by passing that, we're explicitly saying no, we do not want to, there isn't a reformist. We can't dress you up nice enough and with I don't know, balloons or whatever to make this not be an issue.
Dovetailing with what Luke had said, is that February 17th at 8 a.m. is the hearing. And Luke, I would very much like to know who has already submitted records of appearance, because we might know.
I know that that the Easter Seals of Illinois has submitted records of appearance in favor of this bill. I know, I think it's the Autism Society or the Autism Inc. or something of that nature. There were like 6 different disability nonprofits. Well-known nonprofits that deals explicitly with developmental disabilities, mental health issues, those with intellectual disabilities. And we're like, you should know that this is just the same old model that you've been saying doesn't work.
The thing about that is there's only 6 of them, which means that this is something that is before business hours, and the average person and activists and organizations in opposition can be mobilized to speak about this. So I'm actually in the process of getting the witness slip pulled up so people can sign up to speak in opposition to this. And that way we can at least make sure that these folks, if they proceed, they're proceeding belligerently rather than factually.
And we'll have that in the description of this video once we get that up. You know, the police are very insistent that they need to be in all these situations. It necessitates requirement for more police officers. When we want to be able to use police officers efficiently for issues that require that type of force. And the fact of the matter is, it's not the mental and behavioral health calls.
People also don't realize that there's 3 or 4 different trainings for police, and many police officers haven't even completed the 3 different trainings. There's FRDAT, which is Niagara University. There's CIT training, which is Crisis Intervention training. FRDAT is the First Responder Disability Awareness training. And there's also the ARC of the United States Pathways to Justice training. Most officers only have the CIT training because they do it in the academy. And in order to have the really effective police response from a trained officer, they need to have done all 3. And so many officers don't have the time, they don't have the expertise or the knowledge. And so it's better to just shift it from police to social workers, because an untrained policeman or policewoman is a very dangerous one. And at the end of the day, it's about how do we get these people to the help that they need, be it a caseworker, a social worker, a inpatient hospital, or whatever. But the point is that they get the treatment and the help that they need.
Yeah, we want to send help, not harm. And that's what the CoResponder models are, unfortunately. So
sending harm.
Yes.
And more trauma.
Yeah.